Hi, students. This video is about pages 1 through 63 of M Butterfly. When we left off last time, we were talking about uh, Orientalism, stereotyping of the West, of people in the East by people in the West. And we were talking about some operas that perpetuated these stereotypes. One was Madame Butterfly by Puccini, and another one was The Mikado by Gilbert and Sullivan. And we talked about Arabian Nights and The Yellow Peril. You should check out the China Girl video. We talked about Raiders of the Lost Ark, stereotypes in that movie. And we also talked about how it's hard to make any generalization about the Orient because it's such a wide swath of people. You can't lump people in India and China and Japan and Northern Africa all together. And then we finished up by, I mentioned some artists who were sort of writing back to those stereotypes. One of the things that's really great about art and artists is they are in conversation with each other across the centuries. We've seen that in our class, the way Mary Shelley is responding to people like Kant and Descartes, the way, various artworks we've seen respond to historical events and other thinkers. So some works that responded to this issue of Orientalism was Stephen Sondheim's musical Pacific Overtures. And the play we're reading, M Butterfly, is a very definite response to Western stereotypes about people from the East. And in Always Be My Maybe, the band is called Hello Peril, which is a riff on the phrase yellow peril. We talked about how the yellow peril was this kind of exaggerated fear of Asian immigrants, particularly Chinese immigrants coming into the United States. So in all these ways, many artists are kind of raising questions about the way the West has seen the East and portrayed the East. And M Butterfly is part of that. So to return to M Butterfly, the play makes us question all of the truths we've become complacent about believing. If everything we see hides another thing and what we believe about others may hide the truth of their experience, can we really be certain about the truth, progress, and Enlightenment ideals? So Descartes and others had a lot of faith in our ability to pursue truth and knowledge individually, yet M Butterfly and other works say, well, sometimes we don't even see how our vision and our thinking is clouded by stereotypes and by the way our culture has shaped us to think about other cultures. So in that way, M Butterfly is kind of questioning the ideals of the Enlightenment project. And if you click on this link in the PowerPoint, you can see the scene of the dancing in M Butterfly. And I just want you to think about how a lot of the play is about watching. And we were talking in the last lecture about the appearance of things. Magritte's painting, This Is Not a Pipe. There's a painting, a representation of a pipe. And he's saying, look, this looks like a pipe, I get it. But we all know it's not really a pipe. So I think that sort of relates to what's happening in M Butterfly, where Gallimard is sort of watching Song in many points, and Song is sort of representing herself. And I'm going to refer to her as a she, even though we know she's a he, because that's the representation she's putting forward. So it's very similar. Sort of the ideas here are very similar to what's going on in Magritte's pipe painting, right? We see the representation of things, and the representation of things is moving the action in M. Butterfly. But those representations may not accurately reflect the things themselves, if that makes sense. So it's really important when you're reading M. Butterfly to make sure you understand the plot of the opera Madame Butterfly. And there are several pages in the play that give you that summary. Page 5, page 12, page 42, page 56. You'll come across those also in our modules this week. There's a video summary of the opera. There's a Wikipedia summary of the opera. It's really important you understand the basic plot, but I'll give you a little bit of it here. It's the story of a Japanese woman who falls in love with an American, and he has a baby with him, and he leaves and goes back. I believe it's America. Now I'm sort of thinking, is it America? I'm all mixed up from both plays. He tells her he'll return when the robins nest, and he doesn't. She waits for him for 3 years, and then when he comes back, he has married someone else, and he brings his wife back, and they're going to take the baby. And he doesn't even really face her. He kind of has his wife face her, and she has passed up opportunities to marry someone else, and she eventually kills herself. She says it's better to die honorably. Death with honor is better than life. This opera is often held up as sort of the height of Orientalism and stereotyping of these Asian women who are submissive and just, only want to be with these Western men. And actually, Song, when we first meet her in M. Butterfly, kind of makes fun of when she first meets Gallimard, she makes fun of it. And let's see if I can find the page that's on. Might be on the next slide. It is, she sort of says, oh, it's on page 17. Gallimard says of Cho-Cho-san in Madame Butterfly, her death is a pure sacrifice. He's unworthy, but what can she do? She loves him so much. It's a very beautiful story. When Song says, well, yes, to a Westerner, and he says, excuse me? It's one of your favorite fantasies, isn't it? She says, the submissive Oriental woman in the cruel white man. And then she says this, consider it this way. What would you say if a blonde homecoming queen fell in love with a short Japanese businessman? He treats her cruelly, then goes home for 3 years, during which time she prays to his picture and turns down marriage from a young Kennedy. Then when she learns he has remarried, she kills herself. Now I believe you would consider this girl to be a deranged idiot, correct? But because it's an Oriental who kills herself for a Westerner, you find it beautiful. So Song, makes fun of Madame Butterfly, the opera. And she says it's just, only a Westerner could love that opera or think it makes any sense. To her, it's just, a pitiful representation of Oriental women. And I use the word Oriental here, though really it's Asian is a better term, but because we're talking about Orientalism and stereotypes of the Orient, I'm using that word here, though in the rest of our lives, we should probably refer to people from Asia as Asian. All right, so that's their first meeting. She scoffs at Madame Butterfly, and he's sort of intrigued by her intelligence and her sassiness. And they see each other a few more times, but ultimately, the way Gallimard, we've been told that Gallimard is not good with women. He's never had much success with women. His wife and he married kind of for political reasons. Her father was, in diplomacy, and marrying her helped him advance his career. But then after he and Song have had a few encounters, he starts acting like Pinkerton, the Westerner in Madame Butterfly. He starts kind of being really cold. He doesn't come to see her for weeks and weeks. She's writing to him, begging him to come see her. He basically catches her by acting like Pinkerton, by being a complete jerk. And Song freaks out and begs to have him back. Gallimard sort of uses his friend Mark's playbook, which is Mark believes girls want cruel men or jerks. And finally, Song says in a letter, I can hide behind my dignity no longer, I just please come back. And so she's totally different than she was when they first met. She's begging him, she's being really submissive. And at that point, Gallimard seems to feel bad, and he goes to her and he's convinced himself he's fallen in love with her. So he's sort of, at that moment, the dynamic between them, at least on the surface, is very much like the dynamic in the opera, the submissive Oriental woman and the cold Westerner sort of treating her terribly. However, what we know is going on under the surface is that Song is a spy, and Gallimard is not catching Song. Song is catching Gallimard. She's exploited this stereotype of the submissive Oriental woman to catch him, and Gallimard buys it, and they become involved. So that's, a really crucial moment in the play where things are not as they seem. It's sort of a cat and mouse game, but we think Song is the mouse, but actually Gallimard is. And you might think about, in your Think on Your Feet essay for M. Butterfly, one option is to write about what other writers we have read this semester might say to Gallimard. And you might think about a list of the relationships in the play, and how, for example, Fromm might look at them. There's Song and Gallimard, and we've already talked about how their relationship is based on lies, basically. Song is a spy and he's a man, and Gallimard thinks he's a woman who's in love with him. Gallimard and Renee, his other mistress, Helga and Gallimard, Gallimard's wife, who seem to have gotten married for political reasons, though there's kind of a hint that Helga maybe feels more for Gallimard. She at least wants a kid with him. And maybe Gallimard and Mark. So Fromm talks about one of the elements of love being knowledge, of like really understanding that person. And a lot of you in your happiness journal essays wrote about your exercise in really listening deeply to a loved one or a friend, and how powerful that was for you to really see them as separate from you and to understand them better. Do we have that understanding here in any of these relationships? Do these people know each other? You might think about what Fromm and maybe what the Dalai Lama would say about this portrayal of love. it's also, I think it's really interesting to look at Mark and Gallimard, because that may be the most honest relationship in the book. Mark is kind of a player, but at least he's honest about it. He's like, nobody's faithful to their wives, come on. You're just doing what all men do. So Mark is a person who seems, at least in the presence of Gallimard, who he says he is actually really who he is, maybe. And then there's this really interesting moment thinking of how, well we know the people we love. On page 60, where Gallimard has asked Song to strip for him, and Song refuses. And then Gallimard backs off. And he says on page 60, did I not undress her because I knew somewhere deep down what I would find? So this is a moment where he's saying, because he's reflecting on this after he's found out she's a man, he's saying, maybe I subconsciously knew that she was a man, and that's why I didn't push it. Perhaps happiness is so rare that our mind can turn somersaults to protect it. And I love that moment, because I think often in our love relationships, we kid ourselves, right? Certainly people do this in romantic relationships where, they're dating somebody and there are all these red flags and they're like, oh, it's fine, it's no problem. And then later on, it may turn out to be a problem. We're so, wrapped up in the happiness of being with that person. You can question whether that's true happiness or not, that we don't want to look too closely. We don't want to see the truth. We don't want to have that knowledge that Fromm says is an element of love. So often when we think of the pursuit of love, we think of external obstacles, the pursuit of true love. Like in Romeo and Juliet, the families are keeping the lovers apart so they can't have true love. But in this moment, and maybe in this whole play, David Henry Hwang is suggesting, well, maybe sometimes we don't have true knowledge. We don't have, a true love. We don't have the knowledge that is a foundation of true love, according to Fromm, because we don't want that knowledge. We don't want to look too closely. It's too hard for whatever reason. So, this play again and again asks the question of like, are we really seeing each other? Do we really know what's going on? And that's not, David Henry Hwang doesn't seem to be blaming our inability to see each other just on the fact that Song was a spy trying to sort of con Gallimard. He also gives Gallimard a lot of responsibility for that Gallimard maybe didn't want to know the truth. And then he says this other really interesting thing when he's thinking about, Gallimard says from prison, when he's thinking about what happened, he says, I suggest, so remember that Pinkerton is the cold, cruel white man in the opera Madame Butterfly. He says, I suggest that while we men may all want to kick Pinkerton, very few of us would pass up the opportunity to be Pinkerton. So this is a really interesting and maybe disturbing line, because, and it sort of reminds me of what Fromm says about mature and immature love. If you think about, Fromm says, in order to experience true mature love, we need to think more on what we're giving rather than what we're getting. Pinkerton is all about what he's getting. I've got this hot chick, in Japan who loves me, will do anything for me. She'll even die for me. That's what he's into. He just likes her to be into him. He's not focused on what he's giving to her. He's giving nothing to her, right? And Gallimard is saying, well, we all know that's kind of awful, but maybe it's what we really want. Maybe we just want somebody to just be totally wrapped up in us, even no matter what we say or do, they love us. So I think of two things with that you could address maybe in your Think on Your Feet essay. There's no responsibility or accountability in that, right? If somebody's just obsessed with us, no matter what we say or do, we don't have to be responsible for our actions. And it's, again, it's a picture of immature love, right? That's what we want. And Fromm talks a lot about various forms of immature love in The Art of Loving. It also makes me think of the contrast, what would Sasha Tron and Always Be My Maybe say about that? Does she say or imply to Marcus that anything he says or does is okay? And if she doesn't, it seems like maybe she's fighting for mature love. She's saying, hey, love is growth, as Fromm would say, and pushing each other to grow. And you, Marcus, I'm pushing you to grow by saying, these are the things I need if you want to be with me. And he's maybe pushing her in some other ways too, right? He calls out sort of her pretentiousness and her obsession with sort of celebrity culture, and dating Keanu Reeves, and the version of Keanu Reeves in that movie that Keanu Reeves plays is kind of an obnoxious, pretentious guy, right? So they push each other. They don't say to each other, whatever you say is or do is okay. They push each other to grow. And that's what Fromm would call mature love. But Gallimard is sort of saying, maybe we don't really want mature love. Maybe we want immature love. So we don't have to labor, as Fromm says we do. We don't have to work at it. And maybe that's why I fell for it. So again, where this play ends up going, I think you'll see by the end, is that the play is actually a reversal of the opera Madame Butterfly. Song is really Pinkerton. She's maybe the one who doesn't really care. He's just she's getting all these state secrets. And Gallimard is Chosu-san. This is misprinted on this slide. He's pining for her. He thinks he's controlling the situation, but in many ways, she really is. So you might want to read through this slide for the historical and political context for M. Butterfly. Gallimard is a French diplomat. France had colonized Vietnam until 1954. Gallimard repeatedly misreads what the Chinese want in terms of leaders and foreign intervention. And that eventually gets him kind of sent back to France. And a lot of the reason one of the main reasons he's misreading everything is because Song is feeding him all these stereotypes. Oh, if you do that, the Vietnam will let the West do that. If you want to assassinate the president of South Vietnam, you'll do that and they'll let you do that. But that wasn't the case. So the political situation in this play is basically Song is sort of sabotaging France, and there are references to that in the play if you look closely, and you can look at, I gave you some page numbers of places where you can see that. So I think that is all I will say for this video. I will make one more video about the end of M. Butterfly, but those are some things to think about as you continue reading and as you think about your final Think on Your Feet essay for this class. Remember that it's optional. If you have any questions about your grades, come into my office hours and we can look at them together. Yeah, I think that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.